In today's lesson, we're going to discuss graphing basics. In particular, we'll be talking with reference to a coordinate plane, and by plane, by plane, all we mean is that we're talking about two-dimensional space. So two-dimensional width and height. Alright, so width and height, that's what we're talking about. Now, if the sheet that we're looking at currently, if this gridded sheet that we're looking at currently represented a plane, a flat surface, it has width and height, and we wanted to identify some point on this sheet, we need a way to reference that point's location versus some standard location, or again against some reference point. We need to be able to measure the point we're looking for versus some known reference point, or point of reference. And we get this from my axes. Alright, and by axes, let's see here if we can create a line. No, that's not what I wanted, excuse me. Okay, let's see if this helps. So we go here. Alright. And we can go here. Alright, so that reference point would be, get back to our pen, would be what we call the origin. Okay, the origin. And the origin is basically where our x axis, which is this entire horizontal line, which goes on forever. Okay, it goes from negative infinity to positive infinity. Alright, it goes on forever. So you have the x-axis being the horizontal axis, and you have your y-axis being your vertical axis. And like the x-axis, it goes on forever with positive infinity here and going down towards negative infinity. Okay, so again, these two axes cross each other at a point known as the origin. Okay, and the origin is the point that we reference all other points by. So when we're talking about this point here, we were saying, okay, if we put this point on this flat space, on this plane, on this sheet, we don't have any way of identifying its location unless we have some way to reference it against some known location. And that's the purpose of the x and y axes. Okay, to allow us to identify a location of some point in a given space, in this case located on a two-dimensional plane. Now we're talking about the point where the x and y axis cross. We're saying that's the origin, and the origin is known as 0, 0. So what does that mean? That means that x is 0 and y is 0. So if x is 0 at this point, then we know, counting to the right of 0, we're talking about positive numbers. So x is positive to the right of 0. We're talking this being x is 0. Anything to the left of that means now we're talking about a negative y. I mean, excuse me, a negative x. I'm saying y. A negative x. Okay? So all of our x values to the left of the origin are considered negative. Our y is positive when we're operating above the origin. So if we're counting up, it's positive as long as we're above the origin. And if we're below the origin, then our y is negative. Alright? So we have to the right of the origin positive x, to the left of the origin negative x. Above the origin positive y, below the origin negative y. Now going back to our origin, we're saying it's 0, 0, and that we're saying x is 0 and y is 0, so that brings up an interesting term we call point. Alright, plotting a point. But we can also say coordinate or ordered pair. And these all mean the same thing. Point, coordinate, ordered pair, they all mean the same thing. Okay? All it's saying is we're referring to some value for x and some value for y, where x is our horizontal, so counting right is positive, counting left is negative, and y is our vertical. Counting up is positive, counting down is negative. Okay? So a point, coordinate, ordered pair all means the same thing. We're just trying to identify some x and some y in relationship to one particular spot on a coordinate plane. Okay? So say for instance this spot, this point right here. Alright? Now when it comes to points, we talk in terms of plot. Okay? We plot points. Alright? We plot points. We graph lines, or some people may say curves. Okay? We plot points, graph lines. So if you see the word graph, then there needs to be some kind of line present. Okay? Connection of dots. But if you just see plot and you don't see the word graph at all, then all you're really talking about is a collection of just individual points, like what we have here. Okay? So we plot points, so think plot dot. But if you see the word graph, then there needs to be some connection of points. You know, a line or a curve needs to be present if we're talking in terms of graph. And it is possible that you will hear the term plot the graph. So because you hear the word graph again, there needs to be some connection of the points, a line or a curve present. Now, when we're talking again about identifying the location of a point with reference to the origin, we say a point is an x and a y, where x is positive to the right, negative to the left, y is positive going up, negative when you go down. Okay, so if we were trying to identify this point, we would identify a point by starting at the origin. Okay, you start at the origin and you count your x first. X is your first number. X comes before y in the alphabet, so you count your x first. So that means you're going to count right or left before you ever count up or down. Okay, so if I'm trying to identify this point, I'm going to count from the origin, right 1, right 2, right 3, right 4, right 5. Okay, so because I went to the right 5, it's a positive 5. Okay, because I went to the right 5, my x is a positive 5, and that puts me right here. So again, at the origin, right 1, right 2, right 3, right 4, right 5. Okay, But I'm not finished, because a point consists of an x and a y. So all I've done is counted off my x. So now I'm still trying to get to this point from the origin. I've moved over 5. So now from here I got to go up 1, up 2, up 3, up 4, up 5, up 6. And when I go up 6, I'm at the point. So because I went up, because I'm above, should I say, the origin, and because I'm to the right of the origin, my x and my y are both positive. Okay, so now that brings us to the next thing we want to point out, which is, alright, well, this point here had a positive 5 for the x and a positive 6 for the y. So what would be the characteristics of other points in this area? Alright, so now that introduces our next term, which is quadrants. Alright, quad meaning 4 quadrants. So aside from our x and our y axis providing us with a means by which to identify the location of a point, it also breaks up this plane into 4 pieces. Alright, these axes breaks this entire plane, this page, the sheet you're looking at, into 4 parts, and the prefix for 4 that we use sometimes is quad, so quadrants. Okay, with this first quadrant over here being termed quadrant 1. Okay, and quadrant 1, any point in this space would have a positive x and a positive y. Alright, now contrary to what you may believe, quadrant 2 is going to actually be over here, so we're going counterclockwise. So any point in this space, so here, 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 any point in this space, any point over here falls into quadrant 2. And here we're talking about an x that's now negative, because notice we're now to the left of the origin, and our y will still be positive because we're above the origin. Alright, so keeping with our counterclockwise, if this is 1, 2, this will be quadrant 3. Quadrant 3, our x is still negative, but now our y is negative as well, because now look, we're below the origin. We're to the left of the origin and we're below the origin. So any point in this space over here will be considered quadrant 3, and all points in quadrant 3 have a negative value for x, negative value for y. And lastly, we have quadrant 4, positive x, negative y. So now we're back to the right of the origin, that's why our x is positive, but we're still below the origin, so our y is negative. So let's say if we identify this point right here, from the origin we count 1, 2, 3 to the right. So we count 3 to the right, and because we went to the right of the origin, it's positive 3. So 1, 2, 3, and then we go down 1, down 2, because we went down 2, because we went below the origin, because we're talking below the origin, again, negative 2. So a positive, negative, just like we said, positive, negative. Let's look at a point over here in quadrant 2. Let's say this point from the origin, left 1, left 2. Okay, so because we're to the left of the origin, it's negative 2, and then up 1, up 2, up 3, up 4, and because we're above the origin, we're positive 4. And as we said, x would be negative, y would be positive. Negative x, positive y. Okay, here, go from our origin, left 1, left 2, left 3, left 4, left 5. So because we went to the left of the x, left to the origin on our x-axis, that 5 is negative. Negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That puts us here. Then we have to go down 1, and that puts us at our point. And because we went down below the origin 1, that 1 is negative. Alright, so that helps us to understand what we mean by quadrants. So that pretty much wraps up everything that I wanted to cover with you for graphing basics. Okay, so we will conclude this session at this time.